I think our school systems failed us by not teaching, I don't even know what you would call the class, but somehow to personal finance management or something, like starting as early as high school. Because it
Yeah.
just seems like people don't have a habit of like planning for the future, right? It's like it's like a slippery slope of just seemingly bad luck if you don't anticipate the things that are likely to happen, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
compounds, like one bad thing just snowballs into like 1,000 bad things.
Yeah, it's true. Like they don't teach you anything in school. Like, I didn't even know what a mortgage was. Like I heard people talking about it. And I was like, I'm like 18 years old. I'm like, so okay. I asked my dad one day. I was like, okay, just explain to me what a mortgage is. Like I keep hearing this word. I don't even know what it is. Like what does that mean? It's like, oh yeah, we have a mortgage on the house. I'm like, what? Like is that just money? Like what is that? And my dad's just like, it's just a loan. Like you just take out a loan so you can buy the house and then you pay the bank back. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. Like it's literally that straightforward, right? But it's the same thing. They don't teach you any of that stuff. And like for me, like I've always been the kind of guy where like I've always been, thinking ahead. I've always wanted to have money. Like I've always worked really hard. But when I was younger, it kind of sucks that I didn't have this knowledge like when I was in my teens and my early 20s, because I'd probably be a lot further ahead than I am right now. But like my way of getting around that was like, okay, I just want to have a lot of money. I don't want to work forever. I got a lot of energy right now, so that's why I work, 80, 90, 100-hour weeks. And I've been doing that for, years and years and years, is because that's all I like. I'm like, okay, well, the only way that I know how to make money is just to work. So I work, all day from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. And, now after doing that, I'm kind of in a pretty decent spot now. But I'm still not slowing down. Like, and now that I know what I know now about the markets, I can use all that work ethic, put it into the markets, and then your returns just grow even more.
And I think that's a great point. You sound like you started really early. I didn't start till I quit my office job at Brinks, and that's when
Mm-hmm.
I took control of the whole thing where I took control of my RSP. But before that, I didn't have the mindset that you did. Probably at the same age, like so. Where I learned the importance of calculating interest was my first year in college. They had frosh weeks, right? So TD set up a table. They're like, student credit card. I'm like, oh, credit card. Let me sign up for this thing.
Yeah.
That was like famous last words, man. Like I maxed that shit out, and I just whatever I paid off, I kept maxing it out. Like it got to the point where I looked up personal line of credit, unsecured line of credit, and I got that thing, and I put the credit card debt onto there, so I get a lower interest rate. And then I
Yeah.
ended up working like 3 jobs to pay that shit off. And after that, that was like a huge 3-year period. And I was like, wow, what a lesson, you know?
And yeah, I never did that. I was always like, I literally just used my credit cards to get the points. So like I would use my credit card and then I would go on my phone immediately and pay it off like, before it even showed up. So, yeah.
Your mindset's a lot like my dad. He does the exact same thing. He carries no debt and he like saves every penny and he's like,
Yeah.
yeah. I
Like
wonder why.
is like I think 900 is the highest and mine's like 886 or something. It's like a couple points below. Because I remember when I was talking to the mortgage guy, he told me what my credit rating was, and he's like I've been doing this for like 15 years, and I've only seen like 7 people that have a credit rating like yours.
Yeah, I think we compared once. Where's this? I my most recent was 844. It dropped 10 points because I got the finance for the car,
Oh,
but
okay.
that'll bounce back up. It's not a big deal. But like they literally like I improved it instantly because I think anything above 800, you're just like, you
Oh
know,
yeah, you get approved for anything. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
hilarious. But yeah, I really think they should be teaching this stuff in school because it doesn't set anybody up for life. To no good.
Yeah, I know school. I have so many mixed feelings about school. Like, I can't complain about it because like I wouldn't have the job that I had. Like, I wouldn't be where I am without school. But by the same token, it's like it depends on the person, right? Like, if you're like really driven and you're planning on starting a business and all this kind of stuff. Like, you can learn anything you want to, and I think the biggest shift is going to come from employment. Like employment has to be like, okay, you don't need to have X credentials and X, schooling or degrees or diplomas or whatever to do this job. Like if you have experience or like if you have an interest or whatever, like we'll interview you and like if you're a quick learner, like we'll bring you into the position kind of thing. Like that's where the shift has to come from because unless that happens at the employment level, it doesn't matter, right? Like I could, I'm an engineer, right? So like I could have learned everything that I know online easily for free. But if I go to an engineering firm and say, hey, like, I know how to do all this stuff. Like, yeah, I just spent like the past 2 years on Google and I figured it all out myself. They're going to be like, get the hell out of here. Like, what are you talking about? Right. So
Yeah, I think I think there's a shift in employment. A friend of mine just messaged me. I think it was a month ago. We're talking about applying for work, and he's an engineer too. I forgot what kind, but he couldn't find work in his specific field. And a buddy of his told him to apply for his company, which was kind of a different field, but he did it anyways. Like, I'll talk to my boss to expect your resume. So he went in for the interview, and the boss was like, was talking to his friend afterwards, and just said, "Yeah, I like the guy. I like the way his mind works. You know, whatever else we could teach him on the job, but he's got the characteristics of the person that we want to hire."
Yeah, yeah, that's that. Like to me, if I was an employer, that would be the most important. Like, and that's why I think I mentioned it before, that like Kevin Hart documentary I was telling you to watch. Like, I just love the way that Kevin Hart like runs his whole business, because it's him and it's all his buddies from like when he was a kid that run all different parts of his business. Like one of his buddies, I can't remember his name, but he was actually like homeless at the time. But like Kevin had known him growing up, and when he started to get famous, he like called him up one day, and apparently, the guy's like super modest. He's like, "Oh yeah, everything's fine, whatever, I'm good." But like found out he was basically living on the street. And then Kevin is just like, no, man, like, here, come, you're working for me. Like, I want you to like produce this TV show that I have going on. Just like pull them, but that's the same thing. Like the guy had no experience, but like who he was, like he knew he was a reliable guy. He had whatever qualities he wanted to do this job, and he just put him in that role, right? Because he knew that he could learn it, he could pick it up, and like that's the same way that like I'm that way personally. Like if I meet someone or I want to work with someone or whatever, I don't, like, yeah, experience to a certain degree is good, obviously, if you kind of have an idea what you're talking about, but I don't really like, I'm not really going to sit there and look at you on paper. Like, I want to know you. I want to talk to you. Like, I want to get to know your personality. Like, that's what's a lot more important.
Yeah, I didn't see that show, but I read Kevin's biography. You can't make this shit up. I love that title. But he's like me though. He makes mistakes big and first time, and then he learns the hard way by getting scarred. I remember there was a part about his life where he got he just started breaking out. He got a show deal on, I forgot what network, and it was for one season. He immediately he called his dad. He's like, "Dad, we rich." And then he started buying cars for everybody. And his dad bought a house, $50,000 house. Like, everybody just started buying stuff. And I think by the time the season was over, his accountant's like, "You're broke, dude. You have nothing." And he said it was one of the most painful things in the world, where he had to call his dad up. He's like, "Dad, you have to sell the house."
Yeah, yeah, it's tough, man. Like again, it's just a learning experience. Like everybody learns, got to work your way up there at one point. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it just depends who you're around, and that's why it's the best to have this good group of people around you.
Yeah, but it shows why he's like so smart with money now, right? Because if you made those mistakes and you realize how fleeting success and money could be.
Yeah, yeah. The markets are the same thing, man. Like you and I know that better than anyone. That's why like, again, like I was just saying, like why don't I short it way up here? Like, I wait until it comes down, and I wait till I know it's predictable, because I know how quickly that money can go away. Like, you can make $1,000 today. Tomorrow you could lose 10,000 if you're not careful. Like, it's in and out so fast. Like, that's why you just got to be really careful, and you got to have really set, like, strict rules. The same thing goes with business, right? Like, you can't just be flying by the seat of your pants if you're running a business. Just like you're saying Kevin does there. Like, you got to have rules, you got to have plans, you got to look at your numbers, check your balances, and you got to make sure everything's actually going to function properly. Because if you're just, spending stuff around, people don't really realize that. And it's like, yeah, maybe you don't realize it until you have money, sort of thing. But it doesn't even really work that way, because no matter what scale you're on, like, like let's say you're in high school, you're working a minimum wage job, and you get, I don't know what minimum wage is nowadays. Like, let's say your biweekly paycheck is like, I don't know, $800 or something, or $700 after taxes.
It's $15 now,
Is it?
or almost, or that was the target. It's somewhere near there now, I think.
Okay.
Let me
So
look that up while you finish your thought.
okay. So yeah. So like, let's just say for argument's sake, you're making, $800 every 2 weeks or whatever, working a 40-hour week. Like, if that's your first job and you're 16, like, that's a ton of money, right? You do that for 2 weeks, you got like, $1,600 in the bank. Like, that's insane. Like, you've just worked for a month and you're like, wow, like I got $1,600. This is wild. And then, you go out with your buddies to, Niagara Falls or whatever, and you spend a few $100, and then like, you buy a bunch of food, you take a taxi somewhere, and then like you get back, and you're like, oh, I want to get a new bike. You buy a new bike, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I only have like $100 left. Like, it just goes so fast, and it took you a month to make that much money, and you can blow it in a day easily. And it just scales up from there, right? Like, you look at Kevin Hart, it's like, oh yeah, we're rich now. So like, instead of going out to the movies and, he buys a house and he buys cars, and it's like, it just goes so fast. So it doesn't, that's why it's funny. Like when people look like, oh, so-and-so was a quarterback and made hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, how could he possibly be broke? It's like, he can be broke pretty easily. Like, it's not hard to lose that much money. Like, especially if you're living that kind of lifestyle.
You know what's funny? So I was just talking with my boss at the kickboxing gym just the other day, and we both noticed something. Because we're in the market, and you'll probably agree too. Because we're in the market, we don't look at things in terms of dollar value. We look at it in percentages because that's more important.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I think that's the big problem, because those football players are like, I got a $20 million contract, right? But if you actually look at their pay stub, their breakdown, I think something like 15% goes to their PR person, 10% goes to the lawyer, another 20% goes to their manager. After taxes, they're probably left with 20% of that 20 million. So it's like they have way less than they really think they do.
Yeah. And then it's also a spending thing too, right? Like if you're looking at percentages, like let's say, after that you're taking in like $5 million or something like that. And then, or like, let's say it's $4 million, and it's like, oh, well, I want to buy this, this Bugatti or something, or this, like, this really nice boat, and it's $1 million. It's like, oh, I got, a $5 million contract, $1 million. That's 25% of your net worth. Like, that's way too much to be spending on a toy.
Well, I'll give you a funnier example. So the conversation started because his fiance bought some water for the business, and he was like saying she overpaid by $15. It was like a giant bunch of package. She overpaid $15. Her answer was, well, it's just $15. He's like, no, it's 20% extra. You paid 20% extra. It's like if you made every purchase and you overpaid by $20 or 20%, we'd have nothing left.
Yeah. That's a great way to look at it. It's hard too, though, especially when you get in the market, because like as you grow, and like in anything, in real estate or stock investments or whatever, we've talked about this before, the loss side of that becomes harder, right? Because if you're used to, like, let's say I'm only risking 1% of my account on my trades, and I have $1,000 account, you're risking $100. But then if you grow up, you have a $1 million account, it's like, okay, now you're risking like what, 100,000 or whatever on a single trade, or 10,000 or whatever it is. It's like, that's going to be a lot. Like, it's difficult to look at it like that when you look at the dollar value, because it's like, okay, yeah, it's 1%, but like, that's a lot of money now.
I 100% agree. I noticed that at the start of the year, somewhere around February, I started changing my sizing, because I'm like, my portfolio is to the point where I realize like I think it's different for everybody, but it reaches a point where you realize it's not about trying to maximize risk to maximize gain. It's about trying to preserve capital, what you already have. And that switch flipped for me in February. I was like, holy shit, I need to protect this now.
Yeah. That's a huge thing that a lot of people don't realize in trading. Is that's why, we've said it a million times, you don't always have to trade. Like, there's not always going to be a trade there, right? So like, sometimes the best move you can make is just to not do anything, and just, like you said, preserve that capital. Because if you're sitting there and it's like, okay, I know how to do this, I make this one trade, I make money, the next day, I make money, the next day I make money, the next day there's nothing there, then like, I need to save this, because if I screw up, I could blow the last 3 days, and then that's almost a week of profits gone. So sometimes you just got to sit there and just wait, because you can't just force trades. Like, the patterns and the charts, they do what they're going to do. So all we can do is sit there and watch, and just keep our fingers crossed that we see something that we know how to make money on. It's a lot harder said than done, though.
There's that famous saying, the markets can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you get into that period where you just can't for the life of you win a trade, how long before you lose everything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's why like slow times are really hard, right? Because like, if you're used to a crazy market, like, we've been having over the past year, and things slow right down, it's like, you get bored, and then that time frame goes on longer and longer and longer, and then all of a sudden you see, all of a sudden one stock moves and you get all excited, and it's like, 6 months ago that would have been like a C- setup that you wouldn't have even looked at, but because you haven't seen anything in so long, you're thinking, oh, this thing's perfect, right? And then you lose all your money because it's not actually a good setup.
I want to say, I think you're probably your approach to trading and your progression, I think, is probably the most sensible way, because I think if people put either too much money in the market, or think the market is where they're going to make the majority of their income, that's going to lead to you making more emotional decisions. Whereas like if you've had a full-time job this whole time, and the trading's kind of on the side. So then like you don't have the urgency. It's like, I have to make this next trade to put dinner on the table. And so because
Yeah.
you don't have that urgency, you could, you know, be a little
Yeah.
bit more choosy with your setups.
Yeah, and that's like, I mean, if you listen to anybody who's a full-time stock trader, that's what they all say. Like, like I've listened to enough interviews with guys, and the general consensus from every single one of them is basically like, I was making the same as I do trading at my normal salary job for 2 years before I decided to retire, or like, switch over to doing it full time, or like, I was making double what I was making for 3 years before I decided to try it full time, or like I'd paid off my house and I had no expenses, and I was also making my normal salary trading. So that's when I did, it's never just like, okay, like I think I'm doing all right, let's just give it a shot and dive in there, because then you can't have that stress, right? Like these guys are like, okay, well, I've been doing this, kind of just, 20% of my focus, and I'm making the same as I am at my day job. So if I put 100% of my focus in, it's going to be, it's going to be a cakewalk basically. But you can't just like, quit your job and just be like, okay, like time to figure this out. Like, let's just sign up for some courses and learn how to do it, because then you're going to be stressed as hell. And if you're sitting there and 3 days go by and you haven't seen a trade, you're going to be freaking out, because you're thinking, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to put food on the table next week if I don't trade. And then you're going to trade, and then you're going to lose money, and it's going to stress you out even more. And then, it's a slippery slope.
Well, that's like the worst case scenario. But even if you've been trading on the side for say 3 years and you're starting to get it, you start making the money. I think that's still not a good make the full switch yet if you're wanting to do that, right? To let more time pass. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You want to have a lot of money in the bank. You want to be really good at it. Like it's not a quick thing. Like you got to be real comfortable in it.
I just looked it up. Government approved $15 an hour minimum wage starting December 29th this year.
In Ontario here?
Canada, federal.
Oh yeah. Oh wow. And when I first started, I think it was, I want to say like $7 or $7.25 when I started working.
Yeah, I think I got somewhere around the $6 level when I was working at the zoo. It was 10 cents above minimum wage. That fucking.
Oh, nice. Yeah. I still remember my best job ever, when I was at the time I was making, I think I was making like $12 an hour. I was 19. And then I got a job snow plowing, and the guy said that he was going to pay me $19 an hour. I was like, all right, I've made it. Like, this is it, man. I'm rich. Yeah.
And 19, that's good money though at that
Yeah.
age.
I mean, I've been making basically minimum wage for, 4 or 5 years. So I was like, this is perfect.
Man, I had the worst habit in high school. For a couple of summers, I worked for my best friend because they do like renovations. But mostly they polish and cut mirror and glass. So we used to install windows, mirrors, and broken glass and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
then this is not a knock on them. This is actually one of the great things about immigrant families. But like they're all like no frills family. All hands on deck, all age groups, little brother, little sister. Everyone's at the shop working, right? Like 12-hour days. And then I remember we used to work from Monday to Saturday, 6 days a week. They would include our lunches. At the end of the week, we would get $120. So I worked it out. It was $2 an hour. I didn't.
Yeah.
This is years later, but it was like we thought we were ballers because like in high school at 16, you got $120 cash in your pocket and Saturday night.
Yeah. That's the best, man.
Yeah.
You have no expenses. Like that $120 goes a long way.
But that actually reminds me of something I wanted to say about them is that like they're from Vietnam. They're an immigrant family, right? I don't know what program that they fell under, but apparently when they came here, the government loaned them some amount of money to start a business. I don't know if it was a special program just for the Vietnamese or it's some kind of. But anyway, so they got some money to start a business. They started with the company working for them, cutting and polishing mirror and glass. They got to the point where they saved enough money where they opened up their own shop, bought some secondhand machines for polishing and whatnot, and they paid off that loan. They're full citizens and whatnot. It's like there's still tons of opportunity in the West compared to almost anywhere else in the world, right? And it's just if you just increase your effort by just that little bit and be a little bit wiser with how you spend your money, you really can still get ahead.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's not easy, but I hear people complain all the time about taxes and this law and that law and insurance and interest and all this stuff. It's like you can complain all you want, but at the end of the day, like it's like one of the things that my dad told me when I was like 15 years old. He said, my accountant gave me the best piece of advice I've ever heard in my life when I was younger, and I've stuck to that my whole life. He said, don't worry about taxes. Don't worry about payments. Just focus on making as much money as you can. That's pretty much my motto that I've lived by.
So that's where I disagree with my dad's philosophy. I think that's what I think that's what started me off in a bad way because I wanted to be anything but him in terms of money, and it sent me off in the wrong direction because he's very pragmatic. Like if you gave him $5, he'll find a way to buy $6 worth of shit with it. Right. So he's that kind of guy. And like, but he has the opposite mentality where it's like, I can't make any more money. And so I need to save or figure out another way to get value out of the same income. And so like he still lives a very Spartan kind of lifestyle. And I'm like, it's great. I guess it's a great survival strategy, but it's not how you get ahead.
Yeah. A lot of people get stuck in that though, because like I find it's a lot of people that are just upset about like taxes and all this kind of stuff. They focus more on the negative, and it's like, at the end of the day, it's the stuff you can't control that'll drive you nuts, right? Like don't put your attention on things you can't control. Like all we can do is just look at what we can control and do the best we can at that, and that's the only way you're going to get ahead.
Yeah, and like I was talking, I forgot who I was talking to, but I have a few friends, or quite a few friends in either renovations or construction. You're included, and I'm like, or it might have been you were talking about. I'm like, there's a huge void or huge demand for people in the trades right now, and they pay great money, right? Like I forgot what it was, but I think it was just a 1 year course to be a crane operator, and it's a great paying job, and you're in construction, but it's not quite as labor intensive versus the some of the other positions there, right?
Yeah.
And it's like just set aside your life for a year, get that certification, and they're begging for people to fill those jobs.
Oh yeah, there's a ton of demand for that. Like I know, like I used to know a guy at one of the gyms I went to. He was in his like he was like 22 at the time, and he was like one of those like big crane operators that builds like skyscrapers. He was making $150 an hour at like 22, 23 years old. Yeah,
Holy shit!
a ton of money. Like he was working, like 50, 60 hour weeks. So I'm pretty sure he was making like $400,000 a year or something like in that neighborhood.
You know what? I just had a thought of if we have the right listeners, some lawyer or law students going, I'm in my fifth fucking year. I'm like $100,000, $50,000 in debt, and I wish I could get $120 an hour job.
Yeah, man, and there's a lot of jobs for it. Like it's high stress, obviously. Like you don't want to make a mistake, but yeah, there's a ton of really high paying jobs out there if you know where to look for it. If you don't mind doing that kind of work.
Yeah. So there's a lot of options, right? There's like if you're like the physical kind of person, or you're like probably more social, that's a nice job tailored to you. If you're an introvert, there is literally no better job than being a software developer. And that's one of the few areas where it's highly lucrative and nobody gives a fuck where you learn to code. You apply to a company, they give you a test, you pass that test, that's it. We know you can code. End of story.
Yeah, that's one thing I wish I took more. Like I took code for one semester when I was in university, and like looking back on it now, I wish I did it longer because it was interesting. But like at the time, I didn't know that it was going to be this big of a thing, right? So
nobody did, man. I got into the wrong program at the wrong time. I got into traditional animation, hand drawn, in Sheridan College. So Sheridan was the best school at that time, and they like Disney kind of recruited from them. My second year, towards the end of my second year, Disney was like, "Yeah, we're shutting the doors. We're going 3D, fucking Toy Story, and we're not going to be drawing anymore." So I had the choice of starting over again, learning 3D animation, or just do something else. And I was like, I can't do more of this thing. Like,
yeah, that's a pain.
And like I just wish I got into coding because I was kind of lost a little bit for after that. I was jumping around jobs, and I ended up at Brinks. But yeah, like if I got into code back then, that was 2002 to 2004. No, it was 2004, right? So that was like I would have been like an OG coder by now. I might be like some mid-level manager at Google or some shit.
Or you could have been the guy that made Flappy Bird.
yeah, exactly. Holy shit, I could have been one of the first app developers.
Yeah.
So I think want to wrap it up from here?
Yeah, I think we're good. I don't know how long we've been on, but it feels like a while.
I want to leave one message. I think that seems to be the theme of this episode is like there's a lot of benefit to being prepared and anticipating the future, and like just put a lot more thought into your actions, whether it's budgeting your money or your career.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, just be smart and don't buy too many expensive holidays if you can't afford it.
All right, YouTubers, have a good one. See you again.